Today we have a cross-generational expert and an amazingly influential leader from Generation X, Phyllis Weiss Haserot. Welcome, Phyllis. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Nice weather, and as usual, I scheduled myself. But I can't say that with everything that's going on in the world, I have nothing to do. That's not my problem,
Yeah,
and that's good.
it's great. So Phyllis Weiss Haserot, a uniter dubbed the cross-generational voice, works with organization leadership and multi-generational teams focused on both external and internal stakeholder relationships to solve the increasingly urgent problems inherent in retaining the most desirable talents and clients. She leads cross-generational conversation day workshops, forums, and masterminds for professionals, knowledge workers, and university student and alumni communities. Phyllis is the author of You Cant Google It, the compelling case for cross-generational conversation at work, in which she shares the insight and experiences that have shaped and have been shaped by 3 decades of trailblazing in thought leadership, strategic consulting, facilitating, and coaching. President and founder of Practice Development Council, a business development and organizational effectiveness consultancy, Phyllis is a speaker and blogger on intergenerational relations issues for Forbes.com, Next Avenue, Legal Executive Institute, Iris.xyz, LinkedIn, and others. She is also the founder of the Cross-Generational Conversation group on LinkedIn. So Phyllis, coming from a previous generation and growing up in a completely different time period, what was your first impression on Gen Z, and how did your perspective on Gen Z change over time?
All right. Well, I really like all the generations, but I think that I've been saying that employers are going to be happier with Gen Z than they are with millennials, or at least their impression of millennials when they started entering the workplace. I mean, we think that you're a very purposeful, dedicated, hardworking generation. And, certainly, as with every generation, what's going on around in the world, the times, the political, social, economic, and cultural influences definitely shape the way you think and act. And you've had plenty of, challenges, which we appreciate, but you're wanting to, and these, of course, are always generalizations, but I think that a lot of us are very impressed with your seriousness and willing to be very activist. And I'm totally, why I say that I'm cross-generational is because I really do identify with at least 3 or 4 different generations. And something about, which you may not, because there are all kinds of stereotypes around, of course, but I am actually, by chronological age, which I don't even believe in, I'm a boomer, not Gen X. Gen X is a generation that I think has been ignored too much, and I'm concerned about them and do want to help them speak up and find their legacy at work and how they can make a bigger impact. But the older end of the boomers really were very much activists. The Woodstock generation wanted to get out there and change the world. And again, factors, for one thing, a lot of their parents were depression, people lived through the Depression, and instilled in them this, everybody should be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, go there, work hard. And so that's kind of some of where the workaholic kind of attitude that they've had and accomplished a lot. There are just a lot of things that that, were unanticipated. We're
Mhm.
having connection issue.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, have to, I think it's important for every generation to really learn and understand where the other ones are coming from and where their attitudes and behaviors were formed. But uh, as far as looking at your generation, I think I personally, and I think a lot of other people have great hopes for what it is you can do. And there are lots of political issues now, and hopefully things will change drastically. um, but we all have a lot of challenges. But just to something that I wanted to mention, I was on a Zoom celebration for an organization that's 2 years old now, and so we had people from all different generations. It is about getting people in conversations intergenerationally. That is, it's not my organization, but I was there. And we were in breakout groups. And one of the people in our breakout room was a 19-year-old young man from outside of Ottawa, I believe. He's Canadian. When we were talking about the difference between the situations in the US and Canada. But, somebody said, it was a boomer, and another one of the participants in our room, well, it's really up to you. Now, you've got to solve these problems and all that. And I said, but they can't do it alone. We've got to support them. We've got to be out there acting. And I hope that with all these protests and what's going on now, I mean, it's terrible why they were necessary, but they've been necessary for a long, long time. And now I don't want to see that wither away. I think we all the generations get together, support your generation, keep going.
Yeah, I think
It's a lot of challenges there's going to be for everybody, but I think that in general, the attitude towards you is quite positive.
yeah, hopefully. And I think Generation Z is at the lead of these protests as well. So I think they're just a lot more active than other
Well,
generations.
there is, but actually, with the protests, they're all ages,
Yeah,
they're all races, they're all sexual orientations, every kind of diversity you can think of. And that's good. It really is. It's if it's about Black Lives Matter and the killings and all of that, that it isn't just Black people who are out there, because it says, this is real. This is a movement. People are getting it. It may have taken a long, long time, hundreds of years, and it won't change overnight, but let's do it. And not only Black, something I've said in various meetings, we've got various shades of people's skin, and their backgrounds, and why not everybody? So not only life matters, their living matters. Get everybody off poverty, give them more opportunity. What is wrong?
yeah. And it's great that there's so much diversity between everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's really great. It's a great thing about America, I feel like. And going back to the generation gap, what do you think are some important stuff to know about a generation while trying to interact with someone from that generation?
Uh, um, Let me clarify what you're asking. Are you asking what are important things to know about your generation or the other generations?
What's just something important? What are some important things to keep in mind when trying to interact with a generation that
Oh,
came after you? Like, for example, if you were trying to interact with my generation, what's something you would keep in mind while talking to me that you wouldn't be keeping in mind when interacting with someone of your generation?
well, I think I would say this to everybody. there needs to be a lot more understanding of what I was saying before, of how people form their beliefs and their actions. And because there's a reason, sometimes you see some kind of behavior and you immediately, because you heard it hyped, or it just comes to mind and you think it's something that is totally a misunderstanding. I mean, one of the things that you hear all the time is about people walking around with earbuds, and the millennials were accused of this all the time. Well, maybe they're not just trying to ignore you. Maybe what it is that there are these open space work environments when we weren't working at home uh, that everybody hates. And it's so hard to focus, it's so hard to concentrate.
Yeah,
And that's what they're doing, not necessarily because they rather be listening to their music.
yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, that's just a very common one, but there are all kinds of things. So that's why I advocate so strongly cross-generational conversation. Reach out to people of different generations that you work with, or if you don't work with. My focus is on work more than the personal, but they overlap. So reach out and try to develop relationships. And a question that I sometimes get at these forums or when I'm giving programs about you can't Google it or whatever is, well, who should start the conversation? And I'd say, well, why not you? It doesn't matter. You don't have to be management. You don't have to just, reach out and ask good questions. And asking good questions is a really important thing to learn how to do. And listen and
Yeah,
respond.
yeah. There's some great things to keep in mind. For
So it's different, it's different for each generation, but if I go into that, it will take a long time. However, I have that listed in my book, You Can't Google It, and lots of other things I've read and things on my website. So
Mhm.
happy to share all those.
Yeah, it's a lot of knowledge there too. I've seen your website and all. It's a lot of interesting stuff there.
Thank
And
you.
going back to millennials and their headphones and all, do you think that millennials growing up with technology such as the internet and smartphones, like growing up with, I mean, Generation Z growing up with technology since their birth, do you think that makes them smarter or dumber than previous generations?
Well, neither. I mean, smarter in some ways and not having learned a lot of the things that older generations have learned. And some of it is, I hate the term soft skills, I call them human performance skills, but those kinds of things which are really, really important. And interestingly, despite all the focus on STEM in education, uh, what employers are saying is we need people who know how to interact with emotional intelligence, with all these other, soft skills, with empathy. And people have been their heads have been stuffed so much with data in their education that there hasn't been time for critical thinking and for all kinds of other things that were part of the education. And another thing that hasn't been is to emphasize history, and not knowing history, is a big conversation now around Black Lives Matter and 400 years of what was going on. We got to go and find it for ourselves or demand to be educated in that way.
Mhm. Yeah, it makes sense. And I think history is also really, I think personally that it's important to know because it forms the basis around a lot of the thoughts that people may have. And it could change perspectives on a lot of things.
Absolutely. And perspective is one of the 10 essential skills in the book, You Can't Google It. And I think, it's related to what I've been saying about knowing where people are coming from and what has formed them. And if you, I bet that most people who one would reach out to and say, I'd really like to learn about what influenced you when you were growing up and how you made some of the decisions you made and how it is that you see the world. I know it's different than mine, and that kind of thing. And, I would really love to have conversations about these things. It's important we understand each other.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. And another topic that I've been interested in, going back to understanding people, is integrating Generation Z into the current workforce. I know there's been a lot of trouble with that for employers because they're unable to understand Generation Z because Generation Z would rather shoot a quick text message while millennials would probably want to send an email, and even previous older generations prefer to go on a walk and talk about it over lunch or something. What do you think are some good ways to destroy the communication barriers between the generations in the
First
workplace?
of all, I don't even think that they're as clear as how you just described them. I think that the boomers use all those things. They're texting, I will say that when some of these things first were introduced, some people who, just were not comfortable because they didn't know how. But I mean, I was amazed when people had their assistants answering their email. I couldn't imagine that. I had email really, really early because I was involved in things that um, just sort of required that, and I was asked to moderate online forums before it was even on the internet. Okay, this was some of these private ones in the 1990s. I've had email since 1994. I mean, before you were born. um, and it's easy. I mean, what's the big deal? How can you have somebody else do it? But they started to do it, and texting is easy. Just somebody has to show them where you go on your phone and what it is you do. Uh, some of the platforms are more complicated, but they can, if there's a good reason, they'll do it. And for younger generations who are uncomfortable with doing things in person or talking on the phone, actually, the phone isn't my favorite. My favorite is being in person,
Yeah.
and writing more so because I mean, not more so than in person, but after that, because you can look and reflect, and if you don't just shoot it off right away, make sure that you're being as clear as you can. Um, but there are times when people were working in offices together, and we'll see some of that eventually again. If you wanted an answer to something, sending a text or an email might make it very easy for somebody to ignore it. If you walk down the hall to somebody that you worked with, stood in the doorway and said, "I need this now," you're going to get some response. So I think that all the generations are capable of being flexible about how they communicate. And one of the things that's very important in forming relationships, and especially working relationships, is if you're going to be communicating with somebody on a regular basis, or just at least often enough, you ask them, what is your favorite medium to use? And at sometimes one thing is more effective, and at other times another thing. And it seems logical to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's impossible at all. But people, again, they're in such a hurry to do things and then to do what's comfortable for them that they don't give some thought to setting the ground rules as,
Yeah.
they begin. Saves a lot of time and conflict.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And I can see why you would prefer going on a walk. And I'm sure everyone thinks that would be the best way to communicate, but problem is lots of Generation Z is just very lazy and would rather just shoot a text message. That's the only problem I feel like. I think there's a connection issue.
We're having a connection problem again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. I think it's back. Yeah. I mean, I text with people all the time.
yeah. Yeah, I just feel like Generation Z doesn't prefer going on walks, but yeah, I can definitely see all sides of the argument from all different generations.
It's good exercise and it's really healthy. You know, if we're going to be talking about wellness, apparently with all this stress and mental illness and all of that we see increasing so much, and that the younger generations are much more prone to it than the older ones, then you should be doing healthy things. Go and try it. Get outside and
Yeah.
and do it. You really don't like going for walks?
I mean, it's good. It's a good thing to do. It's pretty fun. Just lots of people, when they're caught up in their work, they prefer to be working on their computer. And yeah, lots of Gen Z people get distracted as well. So there's other stuff that factor in, I feel like.
Yeah, but you got to take breaks.
Yeah.
It's really healthy, and so part of, besides the pressure that's causing these mental issues or stress, and anxiety, which is not the same as going over the tipping point on mental illness, but um, is because people don't get up and get away and take a break. And even if it's, stand breathing or stretching or something. But if you can get outside, that's really good,
Yeah.
especially if in places where the air is good.
Yeah, makes sense. And finally, do you have any message you would like to share with the Gen Z community and millennials?
I guess my message is, I think we're behind you. I think what you need to do is to reach out to people and not, all the generations, all people need not to be waiting on somebody else to reach out to them. If they feel they can be useful, helpful to them, or they just want to get to know them, which will make everything a lot better when you get to know a person as a person. We understand that there are many more ways to identify yourself than there used to be, and that's okay. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's okay, but it's something that you need to know so that you don't say insensitive things, which you shouldn't be saying anyway. But sometimes there's so much of this unconscious bias and all of that, and it's hard to eliminate all of it. So the more we talk, the better it will be. And I think that things are, reach out for people to do formal or informal mentoring. I'm trying to put together something I call mentoring maximized. I've been doing a lot of mentoring in two colleges, schools, and Cornell, which is my alma mater, and Baruch in New York. Very different schools. I love the students in both. They're all wonderful. And so that's one thing, not to be pushing my book, but I think it can be helpful for a lot of people to read about those skills that we're talking about, looked at from 5 different generations.
Mhm.
And I am very happy, really, I mean this sincerely, for people to reach out to me. Do you want me to give my email address, or do you have show notes or anything?
Yeah, I can put.
Uh, if you can give my email address, you can give
Yeah,
my website, and I promise that if people reach out to me, I will respond. I will send things people if I can be helpful.
that's great. That's a great message. Thank you. That's very nice of you to reach out to people, to allow people to reach out to in order to help them, because I'm sure a lot of people can make really good use of the knowledge you have on generations.
Well, I'm happy to share it. Think everybody should.
Yeah,
And I'm, as I said, I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted that you reached out to me. I'm happy to talk again, whatever is useful to you.
that would be great. Thank you very much, Phyllis, for coming on today. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Good.